Good evening and welcome to Louisiana Public Square. I'm Beth Courtney.
And I'm Charles Zewe.
Well, tonight we turn to a hot topic these days, religion and government, especially in the wake of the presidential election, which saw an estimated 20 million born-again Christians flock to the polls to vote for George Bush.
Religious conservatives say they're like everyone else and that they just want to live by their own rules, govern their own communities by their own values. Principally, that means living on the rules found in the Bible and in the Ten Commandments.
Well, in Louisiana, like the rest of the nation, political analysts say religious conservatives believe it is their duty to evangelize society and to move society closer to the values they hold dear, because they believe society will be better as a result. Religion and government in Louisiana have had a cozy connection since the Ursuline nuns set up a school for girls in the French Quarter 50 years before the signing of the Declaration of Independence. Even the naming of the state's political subdivisions reflects an example of that close relationship.
We don't call them counties, we call them parishes. That goes all the way back to the Catholic influence in church parishes. And I think that this kind of special relationship is a very important one and has served the state very well as it has served the Catholic Church very well.
16 words of the First Amendment lay out the relationship between church and state. Congress, the Constitution says, shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof. The words theoretically put up a legal wall between church and state, a strict separation which has been consistently supported by the courts. Critics now contend the Bush administration is engaged in a radical assault on that division. More government dollars than ever are flowing to religious groups that actively and openly supported the re-election of the president. Joe Cook, head of the Louisiana ACLU, perceives a danger in this trend.
There is a movement of people who want to have the government support their religious beliefs.
2 years ago, the U.S. Supreme Court ruled that vouchers for predominantly religious schools are constitutional. Although vouchers were turned down by the Louisiana legislature, proponents say they plan new attempts to get vouchers approved. By executive order, meanwhile, the president's faith-based initiative is funneling an estimated $28 billion a year in social service grants and housing assistance money to religious groups that provide secular services.
Our foundation is, the Word of God, and coupled with the 12 steps, because the 12 steps is best practice.
Tonja Miles gets federal money for her addiction recovery program at the Healing Place Church in Baton Rouge.
Give them the tools that they can use so they can stay free.
Miles is the founder of Set Free Indeed, a substance abuse program singled out for praise last year by the president during his State of the Union address.
There have been a discrimination against faith-based organizations because of our religious beliefs. Again, because if there was a cross on the wall or someone used the Quran as the basis of what they do. And now, that has changed.
What is supposed to be a bright legal line between religion and the state is blurred in Louisiana, where millions of dollars go to religious groups. There have been persistent court challenges. 7 years ago, in a case that originated in Jefferson Parish, the U.S. Supreme Court approved paying for busing and giving computers and other non-religious educational materials to Catholic schools.
Any aid to religion is somehow viewed as the establishment of religion, when in fact the real religion that is alive and growing in American society is the religion of secularism.
We're just lucky that we have people like Thomas Jefferson, James Madison, who put this into the Constitution. Or today, I think we'd be looking at a very different country.
In a separate case in 2002, a federal court threw out a program started by Governor Mike Foster called the Governor's Program on Abstinence, or GPA. The American Civil Liberties Union claimed in the suit that the program was using taxpayer money to pay, among other things, for prayer services outside abortion clinics and for religious skits that taught young people the biblical instruction on purity.
The government can promote abstinence. That's not the issue here. The issue is using religion as a vehicle to do that, and that's what's prohibited by the Establishment Clause. And they, the state recognized that after we sued them.
I think that there's a growing secularism in our society which views religion in a hostile way and has tried to privatize religion, making religion that is simply in church or synagogue or temple, rather than seeing the wider dimensions of religion. I think that this is unfortunate.
The political, legal, and personal moral questions surrounding the separation of church and state show no signs of waning. And like all serious discourse about the democratic process, this free and forceful debate is both a test of and a testament to the power of America's great experiment in democracy.
Our audience, as always, is selected using random digit dialing by LSU's Public Policy Research Lab. Our participants were polled on their attitudes beforehand about religion and government, and here's just some of what they told us. Most say they go to church once a week and that religion is important in their lives, with more than half saying that they are born-again evangelicals. A majority of our participants say churches should not endorse candidates, but should express their views on social and political matters. They oppose actions by some Catholic bishops who denied communion to Catholic politicians who go against church teachings, such as on abortion. Our audience believes it's proper to pray in public schools and display the Ten Commandments. At least a majority of them say that. They're about evenly split on civil unions for gays. They favor school vouchers, but at the same time think that private schools that get those vouchers ought to comply with the same rules that apply to public schools. And on abortion, 20% say that abortion should never be permitted, but more than 75% say abortion should be allowed to save the life of the mother if a woman can't care for the child, and that abortion should never be forbidden. Some Christian groups say the struggle today is between their values and the corrupt morals of a decadent society. So let's begin tonight talking about values. Do you think people in government share your values, and how far should government go in adopting religious values? Who wants to jump in first? How far should government go in, say, adopting what is taught in the Quran or in the Ten Commandments or at your church?
As soon as you say, a government prayer, well, which prayer? Which religion's prayer? Right. Is it going to be from the Quran? Is it going to be Hindu, Vishnu? Mm-hmm. So I don't want government involved in sponsoring prayer or religion, particularly in schools.
How about you, Eric? You were shaking your head and saying, yeah?
That was the first thing I thought of. There's so many different religious faiths. So that would take a lot of time, and to balance that evenly among American people would be hard to do. And another thought I was thinking about was, faith is a personal, religion and government are like they're man-made vehicles or tools that God allow, but when your faith comes into play, that's more about your personal relationship with Him.
Everybody agree with that? Anybody have any problems with that?
I disagree.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
Disagree. It's me right here.
Yeah, I disagree with that. I think what is good for this country. We founded on freedom of religion, stuff like that. So on the Christian faith, and I think Christians faith. I think prayer should be allowed. Each individual should be allowed to say their own, whatever pleases them. Like you can bow your head, silence that, but it should be time set aside every morning, like this country was founded on, and for people to do that, and it's not taking that right from them.
Go ahead, jump in, Mike.
I feel that it should be allowed, but it shouldn't be forced on the students in school. And about the issue with the pledging allegiance, by them saying that's by saying guys saying that's illegal. I believe that it shouldn't be taken out of the school. It was this country is set on morals from God. Because if it weren't for that, this country wouldn't be alive today. If it weren't because of God's will, this country won't be here today.
What do you think of that, Sarah Lee?
So I agree with Eric in a way, because there are a lot of different religions. People have different faiths. And if we select a prayer, as it was during the time when I was in school, if we select a prayer for them to say, it might be a sort of conflicting with different faiths. But isn't that, now if it's a silent prayer, to me that would be pretty good.
Right.
A silent prayer, but just to have a prayer that we say daily, you know, it's...
Samuel in the back has a point, and then Mike.
The question I have is this: why do you want to have prayer in class, in school? Are you doing that because you think when the kids pray, it's going to solve all your problems? Or you, the parent, kids are going to pray. You, the parent, has to set the standard. If you pray at home with your children, you don't have to worry about their praying in school. The question we have to ask ourselves, why do we want prayers in school? Is it going to solve all our ills, or we think that is going to make things different? If you are doing what you have,
Jennifer?
Well, I think we're more discussing about the separation of religion and government right now, because the thing is, in prayer in school is very important. I mean, I believe in prayer in school. I consider myself a Christian. But the thing is, there are many religious leaders in Louisiana and all over the country that do support and back a certain candidate. So the line gets real fuzzy right there.
Yeah, but
Go ahead, Dan.
I don't know. To me, we've lost our sense of balance. We've gotten too extreme. I mean, you know, I can understand the argument against having one specific type of prayer in school. I'm not against prayer in school, silent prayer, whatever. The problems I have are when I see things like take Christmas decorations off the state capitol building because of separation of church and state. Or as I saw on CNN the other day, an article where most of the major retail outlets in New York are going happy holidays so they don't offend people instead of Merry Christmas. And it's like we've gotten so extreme, we've lost our sense of balance and common sense. And that's the part that really bothers me.
I want to come back to that in a second. Let me ask you about, though, specifically in Louisiana, about so many millions of dollars going to private and parochial schools, particularly parochial schools, sectarian schools, Catholic, Baptist, whatever. Do you think that's okay?
You need to keep our freedoms. You know, we're supposed to have freedom of speech and freedom of religion, and, you know, don't let them take that away from us.
But how about all the money that the state spends on religious purposes, faith-based charity? Go ahead.
I don't think, I mean, I'm not saying they shouldn't help the parochial school, but I think it's kind of unfair because they're taking the money away from the public school. Now we talk about the public schools are failing, but that may be part of the reason because they're not being properly funded. Because I remember back in the days when just my kids were growing up, they all had their set of textbooks, came home with their books. But do you know now, today, a lot of children don't even come home with books? They don't, you'd be surprised.
Well, let's not get off into education, because we could be here for the next 6 months.
So I'm saying, and the money is going someplace. I mean, they're not just providing, they're not, you know, appropriating the money for, I think each child in the public school should have a book.
Let's hear from, go ahead, Eric.
I think it's not, I don't think anything's wrong with that. The only thing that I would question is if the state's gonna give money to say religious interests, then when another group, whether they're religious or not, if they have a particular need or interest, that they shouldn't be denied because all the funds are allocated to religious interests or religious group.
Let's hear from some people we haven't heard from yet. Bill, how about you?
Well, I think one of the problems, and you see these reports about the difference between kids who've been in public school and in parochial schools, goes to the parents, because most parents who are interested enough in their children's education, if they don't see that they're going to get into public school, they'll send it to a private school, and they'll work with the school, the teachers and the principals, to see to it that that particular child gets educated. And you could give all the money you wanted to the public schools, but if the parents don't back them up, it's not going to work.
And Annie, I think I can read it from there. Annie, how about you?
I've been on both sides. I've had my children in private schools as well as public. And when they were in private school, I thought about all the money that I was paying in taxes, and my children wasn't benefiting from it. So I really don't have a problem with the government kind of offsetting the costs that the private schools.
You don't have a problem with the government paying for ostensibly religious services, what you're saying?
No, not the religious services, the say computers and textbooks and transportation. I don't have a problem with that.
Go ahead, Lee, go ahead.
I think it's a matter of the government giving support to religion. It's not a matter of somebody getting up there and promoting a particular religion. It's a matter of promoting truth. And I think we get away from that because if we look too much at whose God are we talking about, and I think that's a little ridiculous, that or which school is getting this and which school is getting that. I think as long as we're promoting values that have to do with truth and morality, then I think we're on the right road. But I think we make a big fuss about a lot of things that that cause us so much trouble. We keep arguing about all kinds of little things that really don't amount to a hill of beans, but it puts a lot of obstacles in the way.
Okay, what do you think?
Well, I think that it all starts in the home. Yeah. I mean, you cannot expect teachers to discipline your children and teach them morals. If it don't start in the home, you cannot expect the federal government and the teachers and the public school system to do that for you. That's the parent's job, to sit down and pray with the child and teach the child. I have a daughter that she is taught every day. She goes to private school. I don't mind paying extra. I don't mind paying more money besides paying taxes for the public school system, because my whole focus is on my daughter getting a good education, getting a Christian education, and taught the Word of God and taught the Bible in that school. But I really believe that if the parents would take the time, you'd see the difference. You can't expect, you cannot legislate morality. It begins in the home.
Peter, you're sitting back there. What do you think of all this?
Can I defer for a little bit? I want to hear
sure,
a few more
statements.
Well, one thing I mentioned, the biggest difference between a public school and a private school is a private school has the authority to kick a kid out if he misbehaves or he doesn't follow the rules or whatever. And the public school teachers are handicapped. They can't do anything.
Well, what does that have to do with religion, though?
Well, from the standpoint of whatever morals, quote unquote, that they're going on, because most parents are working nowadays. Both parents are working, the kids are at school, and the teachers are trying their best to help build the same supportive morals, that kind of education as you would at home. But in a public school, they cannot incorporate anything that would be interpreted as coming from the Bible, quote unquote. And our laws, our behavior, everything is based on either the Ten Commandments or the Bible, if you go back through the history of laws. So you're handicapped in teachers. They can't discipline. They can't do anything. They can't teach morals. They can't. And the kids they get away with whatever they want.
Let's come back to religion. I mean, deal more with religion. I'm not denying that those are issues. Vicki, would you go ahead, Irina?
I really agree with you that if we start to dig in public and private education here in Louisiana, we probably would never live from here, because it is too complicated subject. What concerns religion and politics, I do agree partly with Johnny and with Dan, and basically with Lee. It's a grain of truth in everybody's opinion, but I think that what concerns money that go to private schools, education is not only money. That is a dedication of teachers and participation of the family.
Let me ask you, Vicki, do you vote for politicians based on their religious convictions?
I find religion as a basis for any type of governmental position. That's a slippery slope, and basing morality on politics, I don't think the two will ever work. Morality is highly subjective. And if what we're trying to do as far as government is based on a subjective standard, we have no standard. At that point, we're in worlds of trouble.
Peter, would you vote for an atheist?
I beg your pardon?
Would you vote for an atheist?
If and I suppose you're asking me a loaded question.
Yes.
I would vote for a person, atheist or agnostic or religious, whatever, based on their voting records, how well they supported the community in which they. Excuse me?
What if they didn't have a voting right?
Well, if you give me a little time, I'll finish that. I would vote on that person based on those kinds of things, assuming that the person is already in office. If not, this person has had a public life. He wouldn't have been running in the first place. So I would look at his history. Look at the way he carries himself. Look at the way he treats other people. Because to me, one of the most fundamental things is treat people the way you want to be treated. If you cannot do that, then there's no need to vote for that person. Now, to get back to the other part that you asked me earlier, I do not think that funds should be allocated to a faith-based organization. Unfortunately, I used to work for the Department of Education, and I saw how it worked.
All right, let's touch in the few minutes we have left for the first part of our program on two critical issues these days, hotly debated issues. Gay marriages. A lot of people condemn gay marriages, civil unions, whatever you want to call them, on the basis of the Bible, the biblical teachings in Leviticus, that this is not what the Bible teaches. Who wants to jump in on that? Is that what you agree with? Do you have a problem with that? Michael?
Well, I think, I'm a Christian, and I think civil unions, it states in the Bible, a man and a woman to be married, but it doesn't state in the Bible it can't be a civil union. So that's why I draw this fine line at. And I believe in civil unions, but I do not believe in marriage, gay marriage.
Go ahead, jump in.
Read Paul. Read Paul.
No, go ahead. Why read Paul? What's in Paul?
Well, I'm assuming that he's already read the Bible a little bit. Am I correct in that? I think you might want to read Paul sometimes. We follow a lot of the so-called teachings of Paul. You might want to look at Paul's social behavior.
Would you tell us what that is? Because I read the Bible every day. I don't know what you're referring to.
Well, I didn't bring it with me. I started to bring it, but
Would you tell us?
No, but the point is, go ahead, Lee.
Paul is rather ambiguous about marriage.
But a union is not a marriage. It's just an agreement.
He was not against anything. He in neutral ground. He didn't speak one way or the other about how a person should join with another person. He had his own particular ideas, and he didn't.
I don't think I would agree with that.
All right, but let's, aside from the Bible, but in government, in terms, why should any government follow what anybody interprets from the Bible? That's the key question here.
Well,
because the key thing that we all rely on, whether we realize it or not, is that the family is the very basis and structure of everything that's been built. And if we destroy the family, which we have succeeded very well in doing up to this time, and we're allowing all of these groups to come in and to give them a voice which they really do not have a right to. And
let's I don't want to cut off the debate on gay marriages, but let's talk about abortion here in the 2 minutes we have left, and then the experts will be coming in. You can ask them what you want. How about abortion?
I don't think government money federal money or no taxpayer money should be used at all for abortion.
Okay. Who else? Abortion.
I just want to say, if we are truly making efforts to have a free democratic society, then despite what my religious beliefs and what my faith is and my walk is, we need to respect and try to have a democratic society, if that's the goal of our government.
And what does
how
that mean?
democratic do we have to get? I mean, murder is murder. We're murdering babies.
One at a time. Go ahead, Dan.
Of abortion, like partial birth abortion, if you're going to let a baby come all the way out up to the neck, why not just let it be born?
Exactly.
Why do you hold the neck inside the body and then kill it?
Becky?
I don't understand that.
Becky?
Neither do I.
If you begin legislating on abortion, you must say absolutely there are no abortions or abortions are legal. Or will you start saying, well, if a woman is raped, she may have an abortion. If a woman has a 60% chance of dying in childbirth, she may have an abortion.
Those are not issues that come up. The issues that come up are others where they want to just get rid of a baby.
Okay,
that's not a matter of...
in terms of religious teachings and government policy. Jennifer.
Now, I worked at a crisis pregnancy clinic, at two of them actually, in East Baton Rouge and Livingston. The thing is, I don't think the government should have the say-so, but I specifically do not believe in abortion unless there is a 60% chance that the mother will die. I'm talking death here. They have to be. It has to be that kind of circumstances, and in that case, gosh, I don't know. The government, I think, maybe could jump in.
Real quick.
You've
Go ahead.
got the thing of like they claim partial birth, allow it if a woman's life is in danger. Well, once that baby is pulled out to the neck, the danger is gone. So,
I mean, that's not.
But that's an example
You're
of the fallacy
arguing
of the whole
techniques,
argument.
but you're not arguing the religious imposition on government. So we'll continue this in just a minute. It's getting heated, folks. That wraps up the first time, all the time we have for the first part of our discussion tonight. When we come back, we'll be joined by a group of ministers and officials with differing views on religion and government. Continue on Louisiana Public Square tonight. We're joined by 4 panelists who will take questions from our audience. First, Steve Crump is Senior Minister of the Unitarian Church of Baton Rouge. Gene Mills is an ordained minister and Executive Director of the Louisiana Family Forum. Also with us tonight are the Reverend Charles Smith of the Shiloh Baptist Church and Sister Judith Brun, former principal at St. Joseph's Academy, a Catholic high school in Baton Rouge. Welcome to all of you. Thank you for joining us this evening. Who has the first question about religion and government? Dan, go ahead. No, Peter, go ahead. You're back there. You're not laying back on us right now.
No, one of the most argumentative questions that have arisen prior to you guys coming in, and you may have heard it already, the question of whether there should be prayer in school or not. Does that didn't specify religion now, just prayer, whatever it may be.
Who wants to go first?
I'll take a stab at it.
Go ahead.
I think religions unwittingly do themselves a great deal of harm, because as soon as religion is coerced, that's the way to turn people and kids off of religion. So I say have at it. If you think it works, I don't think it works. So that's why I think individual private prayer is fine. That's what the Supreme Court has approved. But this coercion doesn't work. If you think it does, have at it. Didn't work with the Taliban. I don't think it works in Iran. And telling people not to pray in Russia didn't work. Have at it.
Well, I think we're about to have at it. Go ahead, one at a time, don't everybody?
I would say that it's a bit unfair in Louisiana and in the United States to compare religious expressions of faith, particularly those of a traditional nature. 56% of our population goes to church once a week in the state of Louisiana, the highest in the nation, with the Taliban. I think that's a question of local school board and local control, and that fundamentally gets into the question, which I think is really the thesis question, is what ought we be doing governmentally? And some have said in the past, education. Then the extent of what limits then do we place upon those educational systems, or what we've grappled with through the years, sometimes very successfully, sometimes less successfully. The consent decree that just ended in Baton Rouge that gave local control back to the school systems would allow the local school decision or school parishes to decide what takes place in the state of Louisiana if it were done in a manner that I think that the founders intended in the beginning.
Well, I'm a great advocate of prayer. But I must say that whose prayer do we say?
Exactly.
And although we are a great majority as Christians, we do have to honor those whose prayer is not the same as ours. So I think to force our faith or our persuasion on a group is not godly.
What do you think of that, Reverend?
Well, I disagree with Steve. Of course, one factor is the difference in our ages. He says it doesn't work. I was raised in a public school system where prayer was the expected thing, And I think it did work. I think it worked to the extent that we recognized a higher authority than human authority, and I won't quibble about which prayer to use.
But that's what it's going to come down to.
Well, maybe.
Wait, before, ladies and gentlemen, before we get into the debate with the panelists, we're here for our audience tonight and what they have to say about this. Dan, do you have something in your mind?
Well, I was going to say, to me, the simplest solution would be every school, we're a democracy, we vote on everything, we base it on a majority rule. Simply have a quote-unquote prayer election in the school and ask the school, do you want to open the day with a private prayer or a silent prayer, whatever you want to do. Have all the students and faculty vote, and if the majority rule says yes, then you do it.
What do you think?
I'm against it because minorities are always protected in the society. So what happens 100 years from now, or maybe less, when Christians don't have the major vote? And see, that's what I'm concerned about.
Then
I think
it changes.
Well, of course it will.
Whoever has a majority then, they can re-vote and change it.
Thomas
just like we do with
Jefferson
everything
said
else.
it does mean, I'm quoting Jefferson, it does mean no harm if my neighbor believes in one God, 20 gods, or no God. Thomas Jefferson. Now, I think we have done well with such a president. We've done far worse in this country. That's the image. It's also the Bill of Rights and the Supreme Court has already
Why do we apply
voted
democracy on one issue and not another? Because it's not politically correct.
Dan, let me take a
That's
shot
the
at that.
extremeness of this whole
because
thing.
the decision that teed this up was a decision that was made in 1985, where our current Chief Justice, William Rehnquist, dissented vigorously in this 6-3 decision, where he said a misunderstanding of the Constitution and the metaphor of the separation of the church and state created this impenetrable wall. And he said it was a misunderstanding that has carried 40 years of baggage or freight in our jurisprudence. That decision was a 6-3 decision. It was on the basis of whether or not the silent voluntary prayer system that was in place at that time would be allowed to continue. Our own John Baker, the Hebert Law Center, argued the case on behalf of Alabama. That court was a 6-3 court. We have a 5-4 court now. And with the radical change that's taken place in the country, we might have a 5-4 court when another decision like this comes up. And that could be reversed. And we could have local control.
Samuel in the back wanted to make.
But it's one of the beauty about this constitution of this country is that they always value the tyranny of the majority.
Yes.
And that's what we should guide against. If the question I always ask myself is, why do we want prayer in schools?
Well,
are we doing that because it's going to make us feel good, or is it going to solve our problems? Until we understand that question as Christians, we shouldn't go for it. I'm a Christian. I believe I am responsible for educating my kids in prayer. It shouldn't be the school or the government that should tell me that my kids should pray.
Mike and then Lee. Okay?
There are districts right now in Detroit that are majority Muslim. So if you live in that district and you go by the majority rule, your children are all going to face Mecca and praise Allah.
There you go.
And that's what's wrong if the school is leading the prayer. If people want to do it individually, they can. The courts right now say they can. Your child can pray in school today if he wants. It's the teacher and the school leading it, and that's where the establishment comes in. It doesn't say you have to ignore it. It's the establishment and the state leading it.
Let's hear from a couple more people, then I want to hear from the
we have
panelists.
to answer, why was it always working before? Why are we now having a problem about prayer when all of this worked real fine? And I know when I grew up, my next door neighbor, my whoever could correct me, and my parents would back them up. Today, if the father spanks his child in front of other people, the kid can call 911 and have him put in jail. All these kind of things have a bearing, and we've gotten away from what the founding fathers have meant, and they all prayed, and here we are saying, let's take it out of and not do this anymore.
Sister, what do you think of that?
Well, I think we live in a much more complicated society today and much more complex. Lee, like you, I would like to go back to a much simpler life very often. But life is just not that way today, and so we must embrace it.
Sister.
We do.
We complicate it.
Can I take a shot at that? I think the courts have complicated it too.
The courts have complicated it.
What they couldn't accomplish legislatively or in the executive branch successfully has been navigated for the last 40 to 60 years through the court system. The federal courts have said that the Virginia Military Institute can't say prayer over the evening meals, a 227-year-old tradition. It said that the motto in the Pledge of Allegiance was questionable at best. The national motto, the under God and the Pledge of Allegiance, and a number of other public expressions of faith have literally experienced a hostility in the court systems.
Irina?
I really want, I do agree, we live in a very complicated time, and our kids, they live under such a stress that our hearts as adults and parents are really bleeding. That is why we're talking about suicidal rates, drugs, abortion, teens pregnancies, but why are we taking bases out of our children's feet? Instead of giving them peace through the prayer and hope, we're taking it away, and then we wonder what happened to our kids. They're non-manageable.
Eric, go ahead.
I think we still personal in the home. The family structure is very important. But my high school I went to, if you were a believer, they had a thing on campus called Campus Crusades for Christ. They didn't go around and impose their faith on anybody. They got around the flagpole, and if you wanted to come, you were welcome. And if you didn't, you stay. I didn't see a problem with that. And it's like we want to sanction prayer and stuff like that, and being in a relationship with God is 100% personal relationship thing.
Why not set aside three minutes for 3 minutes of silence for prayer? You know,
because if somebody don't have the same faith as I do, that 3 minutes they could want to do something else.
Go ahead, Michael.
I'm 2 years removed out of high
which is
school,
based on
and
faith and
whenever I was senior in high school, I believe it was, they removed prayer, silent prayer from football games, and that's something that you always did. You prayed and all that, and then that's in high school football games, and like the silent prayer, they took that out of high school. They're taking everything. That's what made it successful.
I guess I would be against prayer at the football games, even if you could prove that the prayer improved the team record. You know, if you had more.
I'm not saying the team
I'll tell you what.
I'm saying that.
I'll tell you what.
We always had a prayer before the game, and then like it was a ruling. I think it was what 2002 or something like that overturned it.
Well, it's in whose name do you pray? I guess that's always the issue. It's not that I'm against prayer, but in whose name do you pray? I'm concerned about this pendulum that's swinging.
Can
it's
you
swinging.
Pray for God?
Well, not.
Do you need to name him?
I mean, not everybody believes in God. Not everybody believes in God in this country, and even that is something that our Constitution protects. It protects the right of somebody not going to church on Sunday, and most people don't. But
those who are against religion, what about the believers? Are we talking here about democracy for one group of people or for everybody?
there is no more religious. There is no, and then Gene, but there's no more religious country than America, and Gene would have us swinging more this direction. I guess he wants his religion represented. I think. I got to ask you.
Let's let Gene respond. And Vicki wants to say something. Zerly wants to say something. I want to hear from the voice of wisdom over here.
The governing authority that determines what constitutes what we do in our nation is the Constitution. The Constitution makes two references to the Lord. It talks about the Sabbath day, and it talks about it in the year of our Lord. Based on the standard that Steve talks about, our Constitution would be unconstitutional. Our Declaration makes 6 or 8 references, including a creator, his creation, and a number of other things. So the governing doctrines, the history, the Judeo-Christian heritage that exists in America, you fundamentally have to change history, and you can't convince the people to do it, and you're not going to convince Louisianians to do it, so they've had to do it through the court systems with a few federal court decisions that now are in jeopardy, and that's what the big battle over the 2004 elections were all about. Is that our president's going to determine who the next federal judiciary
I just have a question, no opinion. Just a question.
It appears that at some point everyone is sitting here saying that what we're going to do in this nation, in the United States of America, we're going to actually control religious beliefs and institute them in government settings, right? Church.
That's not what I'm advocating. I'm advocating that the people at a local level decide what they're comfortable with through local control rather than through a grand centralized government that's distant from the people and cannot hear or respond to the people.
That's not the way laws are done in this country.
That's the way the constitutional republic works, and that's the way our
Still
three branches
establishing,
balance.
whether it's local or federal or state.
Thank you.
You're still saying establish religion, and that's
I'm
the,
not.
that's the
And
problem.
in fact, we have a religious test. The Constitution says there can be no religious test. But every federal official's got to raise its right hand and swear an oath of office and declare or affirm.
It doesn't say no
and
religion,
then
it says
invoke
no
the blessings
establishment.
of a God upon his office, and that was not considered a religious test. So obviously the question of what we call religion, our founders didn't think that was a religious test.
Sarah Lee.
Yeah, what I think since there's a separation of church and state, and as I said before, I really think the silent prayer, I think we should go with that. Because there are so many denominations and so many faiths, just go with
That's
the
what the
silent
court
prayer.
took away, by the way. I would be glad to have that back. It was
you-
voluntary, too.
I mean, if you're going to have a prayer, I think a silent
The
prayer
court
would be
didn't take
good.
away a silent prayer before I take my test or before I
Right.
go
That's right.
run down the
There is no
football
way
team.
That's
But
right.
they will
Whether
before
or
it's
not
over
a
with.
person should think
They
about
question
religion.
whether you can wear a lapel pin. They question whether you can carry a Bible. They question whether you can pray over an evening meal.
But
And
are
I
you going
think
to
that
exclude
Wait,
Muslim
one at a
prayers?
time.
No,
one at a
I think
time.
a person
Nobody
wants to
can
play-
hear you at home if you all
if a
talk at
person
the
would
same
like
time.
to pray a Muslim prayer, that's his prerogative. That's why it's voluntary, it's individualistic, and it's equality or justice for all.
Bill.
I'm in favor of the silent prayer in schools, but I would certainly hate to live into a country that had the state religion, and I'm definitely opposed to that.
And that's what the founders were opposed to.
I don't, there
Because
should be
they
a
had so
separation
many-
of church and state.
Well, when it comes to matter of prayer, I think prayer is based on the acknowledgement of an authority that is higher than any human authority. I think this fits in with education. I think that education, as we know it, has a responsibility to deal with discipline, and I think that discipline certainly is based on acknowledgement of authority, and a higher authority than human authority, I think is appropriate.
Go ahead, Dan.
I'm not trying to take your job here, but aren't we really talking about morals here as opposed to religion? The reason I voted for the candidates I voted for is their moral stand on different issues was what I thought and believed in. Whether it had anything to do with religion or not was immaterial. It was, this is how I feel, this is what my values are. If this candidate exemplified those values, I'd vote for him. And if he changed his mind later, as a former governor did, I wouldn't vote for him next time.
Let me just ask you, what are those values?
And well, I mean, they tend to be on the conservative side.
What are they?
I'm against abortion. If you ask me about whether it would save the life of a mother, I would honestly tell you I don't know, and I pray to God I'm never put in that situation because I can't tell you.
Okay.
But I'm not against it necessarily on moral grounds as it is. I hate going against the underdog. And what better underdog than a baby that can't defend itself? That's my thing.
So
with it.
abortion is the big thing, the big moral value, the big
No,
thing for you?
it's abortion. It's a combination of local control back to the individual cities and states instead of the government coming in and running everything. It's giving more authority to the school system to discipline and monitor children. It's giving me more freedom in how I teach my children. It's knowing that if my kid acts up at Walmart, I smack him on the fanny and not have to worry about somebody throwing me in jail and taking him away from me.
Okay, I just asked you to define that because I just wanted you to set the parameters of the discussion. So,
okay.
What do y'all think of that?
Well, I think those are certainly very important issues. One of the things that troubles me, though, is that it seems in this past election and in your conversation tonight that we've identified some values that are most critical, and I worry that we're leaving out some very critical values, people, movements that we need to tend to desperately. Our number of homeless people is growing exponentially. The uninsured in our state, pathetic, pitiful, a bad testimony of who we are. The mental illness that does not get funded. There are many people whose right to life is compromised tremendously, just like the unborn, and we need to tend to these as well. So it's a very great challenge to focus our passion and to give our care, but I think that we can't depend simply on government to do all of this. This is where religion comes in too, and we also must serve. But it's a very complicated issue.
Just
that we
1 second, Lee. Go ahead.
When the center doesn't hold, we look to a larger authority. I agree with Reverend Smith. We looked for a lot higher authority, but it's interesting to note that those who don't want government in their personal lives often do look for government to solve big problems. Now on the moral issue, I'm just wondering what would have happened in maybe 4 or 5 years ago, before this last campaign got rolling, if we started talking about virtues instead of morals. Because with morals, you can say, well, you have yours and I have mine and she has hers. But with virtues, that's a different kind of test. You know, a virtuous person. I know you asked earlier a panelist about whether he would vote for an atheist. And he gave a very good answer. He would look at the past record or the voting record or whatever. You can tell about a person's virtuous life. Morals, they change. I swear they change. And here's a very good example. We want to talk about abortion, but how often do religious people or other folk talk about bombs dropped on Iraqi women who are pregnant? Have you heard one story about that?
I would say you could talk about a virtue gap just like you talk about a morality gap. It's not inconsistent or incoherent. It's a cohesive understanding that America is an experiment in liberty and freedom that's in excess of 220 years old, and it's grappling with some of those values in its own version of justice. And they say the wheels of justice grind slowly. Some of us would say in the abortion issue, in the marriage issue, they're beginning to grind in the right direction, and the court system will reflect that. On some of the national security issues, those same governing documents, the Constitution, which says you must provide for the general defense, as well as the governing doctrine for those, many in the faith community, the Judeo-Christian community, would say that the rulers, according to Romans 13, do not possess the sword in vain, but that they might exercise and seek to exercise wrath upon those who do evil, and that responsibility would be a dereliction of duty if they did not undertake those efforts.
I promise, Lee.
You said that morals change. I disagree with that vehemently. Whenever Cain killed Abel, it was wrong then, and it's still wrong today. Morals, that's the beautiful thing about morals, they do not change. That has to do with truth, and that's where we're in trouble. We don't know what the truth is. We like Pontius Pilate. What is truth?
We can't agree on truth and morals, and that's why this public square is so important. That's why the discourse is important, and we shouldn't let judges or other politicians to manipulate the voting public.
The morals
This conversation
that I'm
is
talking
important.
about are like me telling you, don't step off this 10-story building. You're going to kill yourself. It's the same thing. Truth does not change. Morals does not change. That's where we're getting into so much trouble. And Sister was mentioning the poor and all that. Jesus says that we will always have them with us. But if we are promoting values like President Bush is doing now with the faith-based people that he's trying to get going, they will help us to emulate all these good things, this virtue that you're talking about.
Go ahead.
One reply. Even Christian evangelicals do not agree with President Bush on some of these issues.
Well,
There's
I feel
even
sorry
differences.
for him
Well, yes, but it points up, I rest my case. There's not, you know what morals are.
I don't rest mine.
But the person next to you, maybe across from you, will have a difference of opinion.
We have a history of traditional moral values that we've had over the last 200 and some odd years that only have been starting to being changed, whether forced or not, in the last 20 to 30.
And slavery is one that changed.
Go ahead, Reverend Smith.
I think that we must make a greater distinction between moral values and social values.
Yes.
I think that social values tend to change much more rapidly than moral values. But I'm inclined to agree with this gentleman here that moral values are pretty stable.
Peter, what's on your mind?
Can I change just
Sure.
a slight bit?
Absolutely.
Explain slavery. How's that moral? It's also mentioned in the Bible, so it must be moral.
Asking me to explain it?
It's a good question.
I can't.
I'd like to do
There
that, too.
there are sins of the past that have been, an effort has been undertaken to right those sins. And the Justice Department was raised up. There were decisions that were made. There was a war that was fought. There was blood that was shed. And it no longer exists, and it should not return. Not in America.
It's planted in the Bible.
Go ahead,
Well,
Eric.
one thing that
Wait,
did
wait,
happen.
hold on a second. Like, Eric's been trying to get a little
I
question
just,
here.
you know, I think our forefathers did a awesome job of establishing this country. They went into a room and they prayed, but yet still, they were just merely men as we are, and they didn't have all the answers. And I think this, you know, it's too much complexity involved, and I think each individual American citizen has to take it upon themselves to find what God is for them.
Michael, you shaking your head like you can't take it anymore over there. Do you agree with that?
Kind of, not really.
Not really? Why not?
I don't want to discuss this right now. We're going to need a new topic. This is going overboard.
All right. He doesn't want to talk about it. Go ahead. Go ahead, Reverend.
Let me say this. I said something about the difference between social values and moral values. We've also got to bring legality into this. You mentioned the matter of slavery, slavery being in the Bible. Certainly, slavery was legal. It was always morally wrong. But I think we become confused when we think that because things are legal in certain settings, that they're accepted from a moral perspective. Morality does have to do with truth, but legality and social values are much more flexible.
We're out of time, believe it or not. The hour has flown by. We're unfortunately. Thank you all for taking part tonight. And when we come back, Beth, Courtney, and I will have a few wrap-up comments.
Well, our conversation tonight certainly was lively.
It was indeed, Beth. You know, I think it evidences the sorts of divisions that are underway, not only in Louisiana, but all across the nation. People who believe deeply or are devout, whether they're Catholics, Jews, Muslims, Protestants, they feel very strongly about issues which are also politically influenced issues, and they have no problems with taking their political views and their religious views and fusing them.
Well, you say you shouldn't always talk about religion or politics. Tonight we talked about both religion and politics,
right.
But we did have a civil discourse and a conversation that I think is important, and we will continue having, I'm sure, in this country for many years to come.
You know, one of the interesting things about this process tonight was that we had real people in the studio talking to ministers who generally talk minister to minister, minister to politician, politician to politician. Well, we didn't have that tonight. We had people, and they had some very profound things to say, some very good questions.
Well, that wraps up Public Square for this evening, but we hope you go online and participate at lpb.org. I'm Beth Courtney for Charles Zewe and Louisiana Public Square. Good night.
A home video of this program is available. For more information, call 1-800-973-7246 or write to the address on your screen.